Good evening. For those of you I haven't met, I'm Rabbi Nicole Auerbach. I'm the Director of Congregational Engagement here at Central. In the Talmud, we learn Kol Yisrael Arevim Ze Bazeh. As members of the Jewish people, we are all responsible for one another. And we know that Jews can be a fractious and varied bunch, but we also know the feeling of deep connection that we find with one another in times of great joy and great hardship. And tonight we welcome to the Central community a new friend who we have become connected to through a time of joint pain and trauma. Rabbi Charlie Cytron-Walker is the rabbi of Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas. He is originally from Michigan and was ordained in 2006 from Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati. He has been acknowledged for his incredible humanitarian and service work, and he is the next rabbi of Temple Emmanuel in Winston-Salem. On January 15th, 2022, a gunman held Rabbi Cytron-Walker and 3 other community members hostage in their synagogue in Colleyville for 11 hours. And as we will hear during negotiations, the gunman insisted on speaking to our senior Rabbi Angela Buchdahl. This is not a reason for connecting that any of us would have chosen, but we now, and our two communities are very different, and I want to say that we are honored to not only be joined here this evening by members of the Central community, we are also joined on Zoom by both members of the Central community and the members of Congregation Beth Israel. So we welcome you from afar. And Temple Emmanuel. So welcome to all of these congregations that have found ourselves joined in this way. And this evening, members of all of these communities are coming together for the first time to hear more about this shared experience. Leading our conversation will be our dear former president, Abby Pogrebin. Abby is the author of Stars of David and My Jewish Year, which was a finalist for the National Jewish Book Award. She wrote a series for the Forward called Still Small Voice, where she interviewed clergy and scholars about their own faith. And she co-hosted a podcast for Tablet Magazine called Parsha in Progress, which I highly recommend if you're a member of the clergy looking for good ideas about what to say about the weekly Parsha. She moderates public interviews for the Manhattan JCC, the Stryker Center, the Shalom Hartman Institute, and we are very grateful that she also does so for us. So with all of that, we are so grateful to be beholden to one another and to all be here this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Rabbi Auerbach.
Thank you, Rabbi Auerbach. I just want to start by saying that I got to meet Rabbi Charlie Cytron-Walker in person just a few hours ago, and we gave each other a big hug, and it does feel like we are bonded for life now, even though it was actually the first time we were meeting each other in person. It's such a privilege to have you here, to be in conversation, and normally it would have been the kind of thing that I would have loved to have interviewed you myself, but in this weird way, I think that there are some questions that I'm going to be asked, and we needed someone to moderate this conversation, and we really are in the hands of the best here with Abby Pogrebin. And just want to say that in no way, by us being up here together, do I equate the experiences we had. I had a very hard experience, but my life was not on the line in the same way that yours was, and I know that. And so I've actually asked Abby to make sure that most of these questions are directed to you, but every once in a while I will pipe in and share my perspective from where I was. And we are really grateful that you are sharing your story and just being present with us. It's really such a gift. So welcome to Central. And welcome to all of your friends who are with us too.
It's really an honor to be here on many levels.
So, Charlie, you've allowed me to call you Charlie for the duration. I'll call you Rabbi back when we leave the stage. when we were preparing for this, I know you kind of were rolling your eyes at how many times Angela and I thanked you. But I think that you've not only led the way in how to navigate an unthinkable experience, but how to walk your Jewish values despite being tested. I want to just give a sense of where those Jewish values were forged back at the University of Michigan, which happens to be my husband's alma mater. I think he spent more time doing pre-games than all of the service work you were doing, though he's a very good person. But I want to talk a little bit about that service orientation, because it seems like it started very early, pre-rabbinical school. Can you just give us a little sense of what was happening for you as a kid?
Oh, well, this is great because my mom is watching. She's not a part of either congregation, but she wants to see as much of, as possible. And I get to talk about her because that sense of hospitality, I learned from my mom. My mom who was so generous with her time, she was our youth group advisor. For me, all 4 years, but she continued doing it on for 8-9 years in a row, took a break, and then went back to it. But she would actually have, in high school, we had walker-ins, right? Instead of having a shul-in where everybody spent the night at the synagogue, I kid you not, something like 30 to 40 teenagers that she had over at the house. Because that was just her sense of hospitality. I remember working at Camp Tamarack, which is a big Jewish camp in Michigan, some of you may know. And in between sessions, there was a lot of foreign staff. We had some Canadians, we had some people from overseas. And I said, look, I know that my mom will allow me to bring home as many people as possible, but I just need a way to drive them. And so, can we, what can I use? And so the camp director actually gave me a small bus. It was a small bus.
Did you give your mom a warning?
Here's the thing, I didn't need to, because I could show up with a bus and 15 college students, and it was going to be just fine. And mom was, and so that sense of hospitality was there. One of the big moments for me in college, though, was alternative spring break. Alternative spring break, instead of going out and drinking or partying over spring break, I spent all 4 years at the University of Michigan doing volunteer work over spring break. I went to DC twice, went to Detroit once, went to Chicago once. And all of those times focused on issues of poverty, hunger, homelessness, and that was hugely influential.
And am I right that you spent a handful of evenings in Ann Arbor with the homeless population?
Well, I spent a couple...
Like literally staying where they live?
Well, I did a lot of volunteer work, but I also did this thing called an urban plunge, which was organized through the National Coalition for the Homeless, where I spent 48 hours in the streets. It was actually in Indianapolis. As someone who is homeless, we had 2 guides, Brenda and Walt. I went with a friend of mine from college and camp, as it turns out. And it was an incredibly, incredibly powerful experience. I mean, it really lets you know, especially working, no matter what one's position is in the world, when you meet someone you don't know, it just reminds you and really taught me that everybody has a story.
And I am obviously emphasizing this because when we get to the events of January 15th, it clearly informed how you received a stranger at the door. I want to just touch on the interfaith work that you and your synagogue had done that led up to this date. Can you just give us a very tight capsule of why was this a priority? I think many of us have worked on interfaith and trying to be, without being, I think, condescending or trying to in some way put ourselves in the shoes of someone who has a plight that we don't share at this moment. It seems like you had laid groundwork for real relationships over quite a long period of time.
Well, the sad thing is that the latest iteration came about after Charlottesville. And one of the big concerns, so Howard Rosenthal, who's past president of the synagogue, and he wanted to get an organization together so that we would, God forbid something bad happened in our community, that we would actually know one another. And I helped, Adina helped, Adina, who I'm married to, was a big part of it. And we organized a group of people called Peace Together. And it was about building relationships with our neighbors. And unfortunately, we had the opportunity to have a lot of vigils over the years. Right? There were a lot of real tragedies. What happened to us on January 15th, people don't really know what to call it, because it's like, I'm so sorry for the tragedy, but it's like, well, but I'm here, like it turned out okay. And so we don't know how to characterize it, although it certainly was traumatic. That idea of taking the time to build relationships, it's important within our own communities and we need to be able to do that. But it's also important to be able to do that for people from all different backgrounds, because we've got our Jewish community, but we're a part of something bigger, right? And that connection is important, but it's also reminds us of our humanity. Again, if everybody has a story, then everybody has a story to share.
So we come to the morning of January 15th. You're still under COVID restrictions, so people are not there in person. Can you give us a sense of when the visitor comes? You hadn't started services yet. What point of the morning was it? And can you just describe what happened when he arrived?
So, well, I'll say, small congregations. So on a Saturday morning, if we had 10 to 15 people, that was probably about normal. So we had 3 people plus the gunman who ended up showing up that day. We had Larry, who had arrived a little early. He's been an incredible help since he arrived in our community. He wanted to come in, he wanted to help out, and he's done a great job of. And so he was there getting things organized. I was actually running late. I'm trying to get the projectors set up. Larry's a great guy, he's just not the tech guy, right? And so when there's only a handful of people, small congregation, I met a lot of great staff here at Central, but I didn't have as much support. And so it was really just me trying to get the slides onto the computer, getting all the details for the service ready. So I'm running around trying to make this happen.
I just want to explain to people, because I've watched your services, that the actual liturgy is on a slide. It's projected.
Yes, it's on a PowerPoint presentation, so it's on a slide so that everybody can participate with the entire service. And Larry says, "Rabbi, do you know this guy?" Right? And so I look up, and I'm running around, Larry had been running around, and there was a guy at the door, and I didn't know him. It was the night before, it was like 30 degrees, which Texas, that's pretty cold. And I didn't know him, but this guy looked like a guy who had spent the night on the streets. He looked like a guy who needed to warm up, and when he asked if we had a night shelter, well, we didn't have a night shelter, but I didn't have any red flags going off. I'd taken situational awareness training, very important to be able to do, but I didn't have any red flags, but I did. He was somebody that I didn't know. And so I offered him coffee, which I didn't know how to make, because I really don't know how to use a Keurig. But I knew that, but I offered him coffee, and he asked for tea. I had to search and find tea. We had one tea bag. it wasn't, so we didn't have a lot of tea, but it gave me an opportunity to sit and find out a little bit more of his story. Who was he? Where did he come from? Had he been to a Jewish synagogue before? Right? Those, all sorts of questions that you have a chance to ask and to gauge his response. After talking with him for a few minutes, he also didn't seem like, again, I didn't have any red flags going off. There was nothing that indicated that he wasn't who he said he was. And so that's where the security and hospitality can go hand in hand, because that's a hospitable thing to do. But it also gave me an opportunity to size him up, to get a sense. Obviously, I was wrong in that assessment, but he responded. He responded the way that I would have expected.
So you start the service and invite him to stay?
Yeah, so he's warming up. He's got his tea. Jeff had come in and arrived. I had Jeff go over and meet him, again, because it's a hospitable thing to do. Jeff Cohen is vice president of the congregation, and he would want to go and meet somebody new. Jeff didn't have any red flags. And so, I started the service. He was kind of in the back. And we were about 45 minutes into the service. It was during the Amidah. Do y'all turn and face church,
yes.
right?
Turn and face dark.
So my back was to the congregation. We turned and faced towards Jerusalem. And that's when I heard the click. I heard the click of a gun. And our building makes lots of noises. Our ice machine in particular makes lots of noises. I want you to know that I was terrified that the ice machine was going to startle the gunman, and that was going to be the reason why we were going to die, right? Because of the ice machine. I hear it every single day, right? From my office. And so I hoped it was one of just the noises that our congregation makes. And so during the silent prayer, I went back just in case it was what I thought it was. I went back to him and let him know that he didn't have to stay. If he just wanted to warm up, that he could leave. And that if he wanted to stay for the service, that he could. And that's when he pulled out the gun, and I put my hands in the air.
And he's standing close to you. You're standing very close to him at that point.
Yeah, we're talking, right? Like it was pretty close. I kind of backed up right away, just a step or two, hands in the air.
And what did the others do?
I don't know that they were finishing up the Amidah. I was talking quietly with him, so he pulled out the gun, and
does he say something at that moment?
He was talking about how he thought, about how I knew, about how I had realized and heard, right? Like the click of what was the click of the gun. And so he really kept the gun trained on me. Initially, he was scared because Shane had a little pocket thing for his phone, so it was kind of like it was visible. He was concerned that was a gun. I told him it wasn't a gun, but eventually, Jeff and Shane are over near us, and we're just trying to figure. We don't know what he wants. We don't know what he needs, and that was really terrifying.
And did you ask him?
Well, I don't remember if we asked or if he told us, but yes, it happened. And that's when he says that he wants to talk to Angela.
So let's pause. Let's pause here. Angela, your Saturday morning, if you can just describe where you are, and before we get to Charlie's call.
Oh, wait, before I call Angela, though, I think that she would want me to share this, which is that he asked to speak with Rabbi Angela Buchdahl, and my first thought is, oh, crap.
That's right.
Wait, why?
Why? Because it wasn't...
You have to say what he thought I was going to do.
Well, yeah, Angela likes to do this in a self-deprecating way. Like, yeah, right? Like, that would be my thought. For me, I was like, oh, crap. This guy really believes. He actually believes that Jews control the world. That Jews control government. And he told us this over and over again over the course of the day. But right at first, he didn't gone into all the details. But that must have been what he was thinking.
And you had never met Angela before, so you know Angela just because you're all in this cabal together, you rabbis. How did you, when he's saying he wants to get in touch with her, do you know immediately how you're going to do that?
Well, I didn't know for sure, but the CCAR, Central Conference of American Rabbis.
That's what I thought. I thought you must have looked in the directory.
I looked in the directory.
There we go.
And your cell phone is in the directory?
All of ours.
Not anymore.
Why not? Right? Like, it's a good thing to be able to reach out to one another. I had one rabbi who reached out to me, and he had to go through my mom to get my cell phone. And I was like, why did you go through, like, just look me up in the directory. Like, that's what it's for.
That's true.
Right? Not for these kinds of situations, but I was really glad.
But Charlie,
really
before
glad.
we get to you calling her, I think people would like to understand. He didn't ask you for your phones. You don't have to turn your phones in. You all still have your phones?
We all had our phones, and I actually went to go get my computer. I had a laptop computer, and I went to get it out of my office.
Go?
Yeah, he said, he had the gun on me the whole time. But yeah, I went into my office, which faces the sanctuary. We've got the kitchen right next door, right? All facing the sanctuary. So again, small place.
He is still with everyone at all times.
Oh yeah, like our sanctuary is, I don't know, right? It's maybe a tenth of the size. Maybe it's a little bit bigger than a tenth, but it's not very large compared to this beautiful synagogue that we're in. And but I go and I pull out my computer, I bring it onto a table, and so he was sitting across, he was basically, most of the day, he was over by the table. I was on the other side of the table, more out into the sanctuary. He was against the wall. And but there was a moment where I went up on, like, it was on Zoom, it was on Facebook Live, and I went over and I said that we had a gunman. I don't remember at what point it all happened.
You're saying it's live streaming on Facebook.
It was live streaming on Facebook Live. It was we had people on Zoom who were calling the police. We eventually called 911 at his behest, because he told us he had bombs and he wanted us to clear an area so no innocent civilians would get harmed. I was like, what about us? But
so let's pause for a minute, because I want to bring Angela in.
Well, so I called Angela, and I got her voicemail.
Right. So I had services in the morning. I had a bat mitzvah. It was a single, so I got home relatively early, and my parents had just been sick, so I actually was calling my parents and talking to them. And when I saw that there was an unidentified number from Texas, I just ignored it and finished up the call. And then I tried actually even not to use the phone generally on Shabbat if I can help it, but I just checked the message, and you know how it transcribes real quickly? I just quickly saw the word gunman just popped out in the transcription. And so I listened to the message, and I listened to it a couple of times because I couldn't believe it. And then...
and before we go on, we were actually going to play that message now. I want to give people just a warning. It's actually calmer than I think at least I would have been, but you are going to hear it, and then you can say how you reacted to it.
Okay.
Angela, this is Rabbi Charlie Cytron-Walker. This is not a joke. I'm the rabbi at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville. We have an actual gunman who is claiming to have bombs, and he wants to talk to you. If you can call me back at this number, that would be greatly appreciated. And again, this is not a joke.
So it didn't sound like a teenager who was playing a joke. It sounded like someone was very serious, but it was so surreal that I really actually couldn't believe that it was real. And I didn't know Charlie yet. And so I did what everyone would do probably. I went to Google. I checked Colleyville and Charlie and made sure that matched up. That was the first thing. Then I just Googled Colleyville gunman synagogue just to see if it was in the news, which it wasn't yet. So it was still not clear that this was real, but it was real enough that I knew I had to do something. I called Marcia, and I called our head of security, Brian, and then
Marcia's our executive director.
Our executive director, right? Brian, who's our head of security, and sort of said, what do I do? And the decision was that I would call back, just figure out what was actually happening. And
you also went and got your husband.
Well, so then I went. Jacob was actually occupied in that moment, but I said, you need to get out of this thing you're doing right now, and because this is real. And I played the message, and it was sort of like a what? And so we decided we'd call back. Actually, the first couple times we tried calling, it actually went direct to some weird voicemail thing. It wasn't even a voicemail of a person. It was some weird thing that it wasn't going through. So it kind of made me think it wasn't real. But by the third time I called, I wasn't even sure to do it a third time. But the third time, you picked up. And I remember I was just sort of shocked that you picked up. It was the same voice. And I said, how are you doing? And you said, not great, actually. Which I just thought, okay, he hasn't totally lost his sense of humor. But you said, there's a gunman here. He's holding 4 of us hostage. And then you pretty quickly passed the phone to him. Mm-hmm. And he had a lot of grievances he wanted to share about America and the world, and he made it pretty clear pretty quickly that he was prepared to die for his cause. And then he had a sort of singular demand, which he said, I want you to listen. Everyone can come out safe if you do this. He said, I need you to get my sister out of this federal prison. Get a piece of paper, write this down. He had me spell her name out. She's a very dangerous convicted terrorist from about 18 years ago, and known as Lady Al-Qaeda, among other things. And so I wrote this down, and he said, you have an hour to bring her to the synagogue. She's in a prison that's only 20 minutes away. And I said, I'm not sure I can do that, but I was obviously trying to buy time. So I said, I'm going to make some phone calls. And he said, no one has to get hurt, but if you don't do this, then I want you to know I have a backpack with bombs strapped inside. I'm strapped with bombs, and there are bombs in New York and in Brooklyn, and I have people who can detonate them, and a lot of people will get hurt. So he said, so you can do this. You're going to do this. And
can you say the line he said about how I love death more?
Well, he repeated this multiple times on the phone, and I know he repeated it to you guys as well many times. He did say, I love death more than you love life. And that was chilling.
I thought he said you Jews love life.
So I think he added Jews some of the times he was saying it as well, more than you Jews love life. And meanwhile, just so you know, I was on speakerphone, so Jacob was listening to the whole thing, and at a certain point called 911 and had the 911 dispatcher listening in, and so that we could kind of have, record of it. But he also just strangely also sort of said why he called me. He said, I'm calling you because, he said, I know that Jews are powerful and they're connected, and you lead a big synagogue in New York. He said, I saw that you're friends with Obama, because he found some online picture of me when I was at the White House. And he said, and I see you play guitar, which was a weird thought, but I thought to myself, he's looking at YouTube videos, like how much research has he done? And finally, he said something which has stayed with me, which is like, this needs a woman's touch. So, right, remember he said that? And I thought, that is so bizarre. But when he was doing this, what I thought was interesting is I actually think he wanted to appeal to my humanity, that I was going to understand the cause that he needed me to do, which was to free Siddiqui. And interestingly, when he talked about that, he said, she was wrongly imprisoned, she's been in jail, she's suffering, she's been raped. You as a woman have to understand why she has to be free. So I think there was a part of him that in some way decided that it was like a woman would understand why this was a just cause. In a very strange way, he was trying to appeal to my humanity.
So,
and by the way, I'm so sorry that I...
What were you going to do?
I know, but still, I felt awful because I knew how I would have felt if I would have had that voicemail.
Well,
right? And you should know, because Angela did call the FBI, and I was just at a conference with the FBI about the incident this past week, and we actually may have Chief Miller of the Colleyville Police and Matt DeSarno from who's the special agent in charge of the Dallas office, maybe on Zoom. They really wanted to get the link. I don't know if they were able to register or not. But they said that your recounting of all of the details, all of the way that you were calm, the way that you handled yourself and gave them a lot of very good information, they thought it was amazing. And they thought it was absolutely fantastic. And
well, one
so
of the things
you had a lot of fans at the FBI.
Thank you.
One of the things I kept hearing is how important the first hours are of something like this. I want to get back to where you are, but I want to pick up on what you just said, because it's striking that you're having this compassion for our rabbi. I'm glad that you do. But she's in a place of much more safety at that moment than you are. So it just strikes me that you're even feeling the weight of handing some responsibility for her. I just, at that moment, you are really looking at a situation that could just end in the worst way. And can you give us a bit of a sense? I don't want to do the Barbara Walters, how did that feel? But it is something that's very hard to fathom, what you're looking at in terms of your chances.
I wasn't looking at it from that perspective. I was looking at it from, what can I do? What do I have control over? What don't I have control over? And so I was trying to make sure that I could do whatever possible to give us the best chance to get out of there. It turns out that he didn't have any bombs. We didn't know it. It turns out that there wasn't anybody in New York, right? We didn't know it. And it was one step at a time. What can I do in this moment? It was really about being present, not thinking about everything else that was happening outside. I had an immediate need, and I had to focus in on that.
And one of the things that you clearly did very consciously was create a relationship with him, was to talk to him. He knew that you have kids. He knew that the others have kids. Can you give us a sense of just how that unfolded?
Well, he was very chatty with us. I mean, at first it was very immediate. He was very, very forceful, very threatening. And we got, after, I think we were probably on the phone with 911 at the time when, Angela, when you called back. And so getting the attention of the police, right? Getting the attention, he wanted attention, and he was getting attention. And so he got the call back from Rabbi Angela. We eventually shifted over to a 911 operator. But kind of in between those times, when there was a little bit of downtime, he started talking a lot with Jeff initially. And I wanted to try to make sure that the focus was on me as much as possible, so that, if there was a chance that the other guys would be able to get away.
Was there any tacit or quiet side conversation that you had with your fellow congregants about the fact that they should get out if they could, or was there a sense that it would be risky if one person?
We didn't have a lot of chance to talk to each other. We were a little bit spread out. He had us over kind of in the same area. Jeff and Shane might have been able to talk with each other. Larry, who is an older gentleman, was still actually kind of in the center of the sanctuary. Like we joked that, it looked like he was sleeping, and he was just staying unobtrusive more than anything else. There's a little bit of conversation.
I will say one thing
with
which
him.
I think you might not share, but that I know is that you each had opportunities to go to the bathroom unaccompanied, and it could have been that any one of them, if they wanted to, could have made a run for it when he was with the other three, of course putting at risk the other three tremendously, and none of them left anyone else behind, which I think is also really significant.
And to Angela's point, there's also a moment, I know it's leaping ahead, where he did say one of you could go. That was because you suggested that he would be taken more seriously if he essentially showed some good faith.
Well, so the FBI negotiators were really pushing that. We're really pushing that.
Let someone go.
Yeah, let someone go. And then through the conversations that we had, we were really just trying to, like, he was asking us initially, right, about our families. He let us call our family twice. He let us keep our phones. I mean,
did he listen on those calls, or?
No, we were just talking. We were able to call. I mean, he didn't really move to go and listen. He didn't make us do it one at a time or anything along those lines. It was, again, it was obviously a very, very strange and difficult and challenging ordeal. But we wanted to help him see our humanity, and because of that, because of the FBI, because actually Shane was pretending that he was sicker than he actually was, he allowed Shane to go. And Shane said that maybe it would be better if Larry left. And so Larry was able to get out. And that turned out to be a real positive, because Larry would have had a harder time moving quickly.
He would have had a harder time escaping.
He would have had a harder time escaping at the end.
And were you thinking of how we're going to escape? What do we need to do to escape? Were you assuming that the FBI is going to be saving you?
Well, so no, we when you take active shooter training, this wasn't an active shooter situation, it was a hostage situation. I've never taken anything on hostage, how to be a good hostage.
You didn't have that in rabbinical school.
Right, they didn't have it in rabbinical school. I don't think that the ADL teaches that one, but I did do active shooter training at least 4, maybe 5 times. I did it with the FBI, I did it with the ADL, we did it in our synagogue with our local PD, and we've done it a lot. And in addition to situational awareness with Secure Communities Network, in those sessions, if you're in a life-threatening situation like that, the ideas of what sticks in your head is that even though it's maybe not like the most accurate, but it's really helps you remember, it's run, hide, or fight. We couldn't run. We couldn't hide. But so we were looking for an opportunity where we would have a chance to get out. And we knew that it might need to be something physical. But all day long, we were looking for that opportunity.
And it wasn't there.
And all day long, it might have been there, right? Like there was a couple of moments where we were like...
What about the pizza moment? What about the pizza?
There wasn't any... With regard to the pizza, there wasn't much that we could do, because I had to leave the synagogue to go to the front door, right? So he had the gun trained on me, but he had, right? He had 3 other people that he could have shot. I don't remember if we got Larry out before or after the pizza. I think we got Larry out before, but there was 2 other guys.
But a pizza delivery person came to the door, and you opened the door and got the pizza.
No, pizza was left at the door, probably by the FBI. They didn't let just some pizza delivery person. Come on, right? And so we were watching, and you could see like there's a door that opens up that you can kind of look out and see what's going on out there.
And you saw there was trucks everywhere and press everywhere.
Well, there was no press at the sanctuary, and the press was back at the Catholic Church about a quarter mile away.
Okay, I want to pause for a minute just to go back to the second phone call, and what you're feeling, if you can share, of just about the responsibility here as these hours are ticking by.
So I'd been given that deadline of an hour, essentially, and was on hold with 911 where they said, okay, we've gotten the information, but this was like a Colleyville dispatcher, and they basically said, we'd like you to stay online for when the FBI negotiator gets on, and then we'll want to talk to you. So I was just on kind of hold, not indefinitely, but for more than 45 minutes. And while I'm on hold, I get a second phone call from Texas, and I hear the message, and it's Jeff this time saying, the gunman would like to speak to you again. Can you call us back? So this time I tell the dispatcher, I think I'm supposed to call back. Now, in the movie of this hostage situation, I would have had like the FBI there with like the headphones on. They would have told me what to say. But instead, I was there by myself, like on hold with like 911 and like getting another call from the gunman and not knowing what I'm supposed to say. It's like, so I actually asked the dispatcher, what should I do? And she said, why don't you call him back, and I'll give you the direct line. You can call me back when you're done. I don't think that's really supposed to be the way it was handled, but I don't think they'd ever had this situation in Colleyville before. So that was the instruction from 911, and I was like, okay. So I hung up, took down the number. She said, don't worry, all four of us, there are 4 dispatchers in Colleyville, all 4 of us know about the situation, so just call back. Anyway, so it was, the whole thing could not have been more surreal, but I called back to Jeff. Jeff puts the gunman back on pretty quickly, and this time it was pretty brief, but he just wanted to know where things stood. And all I could think was, I have to buy some more time. So I said, we're making phone calls, we're making progress, like I think that this, please don't do anything rash, essentially trying to make sure that he wouldn't do something after the hour passed, because we were getting close to the hour. And I was completely terrified that he would actually, that ultimatum was going to be something he would uphold. And he just said, I'm running out of patience and you're running out of time. And basically hung up on me. I can't explain what that felt like in that moment exactly, but it was a, I felt completely responsible for your 4 lives, because he made it sound like I could make that happen. But of course I couldn't make that happen. And after even the first phone call, I was shaking and had some tears in my eyes and started praying. And I would say that, then I got a little desperate. I knew one person in the Justice Department that I immediately called. I was like, well, could we actually get Siddiqui out just for 20 minutes? Just bring her to the synagogue. It was kind of magical thinking that we would somehow be able to figure out a way to do this. Of course, that was not the case. And so then all I could do was just listen for any piece of news that we would get about what was happening at that point. At that point, it was in the news, and so we could follow it. And then it took a little bit longer, but then I had FBI and NYPD counterterrorism descend on the apartment.
And then the press is also finding out that it's you. And
yeah, that took till about 6 o'clock, and then I don't know exactly what happened. It was like a bell went off, or something must have been leaked. But I got my cell phone started to blow up with CNN, and New York Post, NBC, right. And I felt very vulnerable that all these people had my cell phone. I didn't understand how they all had my cell phone number and were getting me directly. I ignored all of them and didn't talk to the press all week.
So Charlie, unfortunately, I want to get to some of the lessons learned, but
Well, about the press, I just wanted to add that I had the phone at the congregation was ringing basically nonstop. Largely it was media trying to get through. And I had reporters and people, this is so-and-so from this news outlet, you know, and I was like,
what do they think you're going to pick
let
up
me
the
just, pardon me, gunman, I gotta go talk to the press here, right?
Yeah.
Like it was very strange to see how many people had reached out in that moment, right? Like,
and there's also, you mentioned the Good Shepherd Catholic Church. There's an interfaith gathering the entire day. There's people who obviously know you.
Well, yeah, it was a place for family to come, and some people from the community also came to offer support, show support.
And you know that pretty much, certainly every Jew we know was tuned into the news all day, that this felt like something we were all going through.
See, I didn't know that until afterwards. I didn't know that at the moment. I knew that I ruined your day. Right? And oh my God, when you talk about that sense of responsibility, that's why I apologized, because I knew that, oh my gosh, how helpless, right? Like I felt helpless the whole day.
Yeah.
And
yet, the things you did were the things that saved your life and 3 others, really.
So let's talk.
It's not just about the heroic act at the end. It was the way that you continued to treat the gunman as a human being, which enabled him to say, you know, he said to me even on the first phone call, these are good people, I don't want to hurt them. I mean, he felt that.
So I want to get to the things that you did, because I also want to talk about some of the lessons learned, and believe it or not, we're running out of time. The decision to finally go. It's hard for some of us watching this to understand why the FBI waited as long as they did. We'd like to think the cavalry is coming. Ultimately, you were not rescued. You saved yourselves. And that was like a Hail Mary pass. There was no coordination or great planning that could have happened. You weren't huddling together. So this had to almost be like you were sensing what you were going to do, and you're leading the way. Can you talk about the juice opportunity and his, I think at that point, saying that you were on your knees? You should get on your knees?
Well, yeah, so the FBI was assessing the situation. They were able to assess the situation all throughout the day, both on the call and when they weren't on the call. And so they were monitoring, they were looking for their best opportunity. And they, like, when it comes to the FBI, I've got nothing but gratitude for the work that they did and the way that they handled the situation. It was, at the very end, he was very agitated. And his agitation was worse than it had been all day long. He was losing patience. He had talked about his compassion, how compassionate he was all day long, and now he was saying that he wasn't going to be compassionate. He was yelling at the negotiator. The calls were a lot quicker. He really wanted to make something happen, and it turned out that when he got off the phone, the FBI made the same decision
that you made.
Right? They were
something had turned.
The FBI was basically about to come in, and after he got off the phone, and so he did tell the FBI that he was about to make us kneel down. Right, and he was going to, kill us one at a time if his needs weren't met. And after he got off that phone, he got really calm, and he asked for some juice. Of course, we had juice, and so I go and I went to the kitchen, and there's a window. In the kitchen, in the wall to the kitchen, so that way he could see in. He could follow me the whole time. And I opened up the refrigerator, and he saw that we had what I would call a can of pop, but y'all might call it a can of soda. But so he saw a soda, and so he asked for he asked for, for the soda, and it was a can. And so I got him a glass, or like a plastic cup to drink out of. And I brought it over to him, and instead of making us get on our knees, he was basically preaching at us. But for the first time all day, in a way that we could see and it was really visible, he was focused on us. He had the cup in his hand, and he was, kind of talking about how he had been so compassionate and those kinds of things, and how frustrated he was with the process, and we didn't know what he was going to do. His left hand was over the top of the gun, but it wasn't actually on the trigger. And the door, for Jeff and for Shane, who were still in the building at the time, it was maybe, I don't know if it was 10 feet. It wasn't very far away. I was a little bit further away. I was closer to him. And again, when you go through those trainings, it's about run, hide, fight. And so, were it not for those trainings, were it not for those sessions and workshops, I wouldn't have had the courage. But they really talk about how if you don't have any other options, you need to do something. And so this happened to be the best, what I considered to be the best opportunity of the day.
And was there any eye contact with Jeff and Shane before you throw the chair, or you just decided, I'm doing it and I'm shouting to go?
No, I told the guys to run. I said, run, and I picked up the chair and I threw it. I surprised him. He was mid-sentence, right? And so it allowed us to get out of the building without a shot being fired.
And all of you run in a line. We saw the footage, I think, of the door opening. Are you the last out?
Yeah, I'm the last out. And again, the FBI team, I remembered, after I got out, I was like, oh wait, the FBI, they go through the instructions. I was supposed to get on the ground and, basically say that I'm not the gunman. Mm. Right?
And you did that?
Yeah, so I did that, and but they called us over to him within a couple. But we were out of the building and behind a Bearcat, which is this massive vehicle, armored vehicle. And there was 4 or 5 Bearcats, or more. I don't know. There was a lot of them all around the building, and we were out maybe 20, 30 seconds when there was a big boom. And that was the FBI coming in. And that's how quick. They didn't know that we were out.
And when you ran, did you think I might feel a bullet at any time? That he might shoot you on your way out?
Again, I was focused on what I could do. I was focused on making sure that I ran, making sure that I got clear. And I hoped I didn't hear a gunshot, so that was a good sign. But the FBI was literally, as we were on our way out, right, 20, 30 seconds, the FBI was on their way in.
You said in another interview, we were fearful the whole time. Listening to you, it's almost like your focus, I'm not saying that the fear isn't coming through, but the terror that I think most of us are feeling listening, I'm not sure where you were putting that. As I listen to you.
Well, you can't forget every interaction that we had that day, where I can look back at it and I can talk about it, but every interaction that day, he had a gun pointed at us. At the very end, in between calls with the FBI, I was literally begging for my life. The last call with the FBI, I answered the phone, and I was like, hey, if you can bring this woman, please, now's the time. I was absolutely absolutely terrified. It was worse that first hour and a half and the last hour and a half. It was much worse. But the in-between times, they weren't fun either. It was scary. It was very, very scary.
So, Angela, the FBI at first said this was not an anti-Semitic incident. And I want to give you a chance to tell us how you responded to that. They then corrected that statement.
Wait, may I?
Mm-hmm.
That was a situation where the anti-Semitism wasn't a part of the question. And what was SAC DeSarno in terms of responding and talking about the incident, there was never any notion within the FBI that this was not an anti-Semitic attack. There was never any notion, but it was one comment that gets picked up by one reporter who did a good job of making a lot of press and making a lot of noise. There was never any inkling within the FBI that it was not an anti-Semitic attack.
It became part of the narrative of the story.
Yeah, I feel badly because I have definitely perpetuated that, because it was one of the things that felt very problematic coming out of it, was this sense that, do people only recognize it as anti-Semitism if he says, I hate Jews, when clearly the idea that he's saying, call a Jew and, use your connections to get this person out of prison. Yeah. That's obviously clearly anti-Semitism.
I don't want to go around facts because they're inconvenient. It's very important to know that. Mm-hmm. But we do know that the trope of Jews have power, Jews are connected, is something that's often disregarded as being or rejected as anti-Semitism. So I just want to give you, Angela, a chance to respond to.
I think that in simplistic ways of the way we think about racism or other kinds of bigotry, we think of it as sort of, punching down, the idea that it's about looking down on someone. I think or people not having power or being oppressed. I think that sometimes people don't understand that comments that can feel like it's an elevation of people, for perhaps ways that people will say, well, Jews are so powerful, they're influential, they run the media, they're wealthy, all of these things. There are, by the way, some of these tropes that Jews, we ourselves, have said, sometimes proudly, sometimes chauvinistically, but these are things that are, there, but it's not sometimes seen as anti-Semitism because, but that's, maybe it's said with admiration, or maybe it's said as something that is, with pride. And I guess part of the danger is any of those kinds of stereotypes can be obviously very dangerous. And even when there's a saying that like a philo-Semite is just an anti-Semite who likes Jews, and it really is still extremely dangerous to have those kinds of tropes that play. And these tropes are thousands of years old. These are not new tropes about Jews. They're just mutations of ones that have been around for a long time. So I think Colleyville was actually an expression of this taken to the extreme of the danger of a person who actually believes that Jews have influence and power to run the world with like puppet strings.
Charlie, ADL Chief Jonathan Greenblatt said, we've gotten to the point where our clergy need to be schooled not only in Torah but in tactics. And there was a big takeaway of that we all have to wake up and recognize that Colleyville was one, as you pointed out in several interviews. This was not a singular event. This is one in a chain. And we have to recognize that we're in a place where security has to be more prioritized and paramount, something that all of us struggle with.
Yeah, and I would say that it was an isolated incident. This guy was alone. He did this on his own. He didn't do this as a part of a group or anything along those lines, but the rise in anti-Semitism that we're seeing is obviously very, very concerning. And unfortunately, look, this isn't just something that we need to do in our synagogues, but it's something that our kids have been doing for years. Mm-hmm. Sandy Hook was 10 years ago? I mean, our kids are in public schools are doing lockdown drills, right? Like my girls grew up with lockdown drills. That's their reality, not just tornado and fire anymore, right? And so we live in a world where, unfortunately, this can happen in a synagogue, this can happen in a mosque, this can happen in a church. Right? I mean, the deadliest shooting, mass shooting in Texas, in the state of Texas, was in Sutherland Springs at a church. And this was a domestic violence situation. 26 people were killed. Dozens more wounded, right? It's horrible that we live in this world where this is necessary. We need to work towards changing that world. But until we do, until that world is transformed, we need, if y'all haven't taken active shooter training, if you haven't done one of those workshops, unfortunately, it's something that we need to be able to do because it can happen in a house of worship. It can happen in a movie theater. It can happen at the mall. It can happen on the street.
So,
can I add, though, that even though I completely agree that the gunman was sort of acting on his own and was not part of a larger cabal of people that we know of, I do think, though, that he was imbibing an anti-Semitic language and learning that is more
Absolutely.
systemic and is in the air. And you can see these kinds of tropes played out all over social media all the time by mainstream people. This is not on the fringe anymore. It's not just white supremacists saying this. There are celebrities that are using some of these tropes, Congress people using some of these tropes. And so I think that we actually have to acknowledge that while it might be someone who is acting on their own, and it's filtered through someone who I think was probably mentally ill, I do think that there are systemic anti-Semitic issues that feed someone's idea that he didn't go to a church that was near the penitentiary and say to the pastor, I want you to free Siddiqui. He went to a synagogue for a reason, because he really believed that Jews were the ones who could do this. So there is a system that he's a part of that is not just him acting alone. So
Charlie, you know that there are those in our community who look at this situation and say, he opened the door. And this proves not to blame him. He was doing the right thing and living by our mandate to welcome the stranger, repeated 36 times in our Hebrew Bible. But at the end of the day, people hate us, and we need to prioritize protection over an outstretched arm. I know you wrote a very powerful op-ed about how challenged this idea was for you in real time, but how do you help us without I'm not saying that preaching these things don't matter, but sometimes they feel a little bit like we're hearing it, they're falling on deaf ears because we're looking at something that frightens us.
Well, for me, it's not about fear. It's about acknowledging that this kind of thing can happen. And if we acknowledge that this can happen, right, like you don't take CPR training, and then after you've taken that training, you're like wondering who in the room, right, is going to have the heart attack so you can come and save the day. And you can utilize your training. We do it because just in case, we can be prepared, right? So for me, it's not about fear, but at the same time, what does love the stranger mean? Strangers, by definition, are the unknown. I've led services at Congregation Beth Israel, I don't know, well over 1,000 times, I think, right? Add them all up, right? And I've only been taken hostage once. And most rabbis can proudly say that they've never been taken hostage before. This is such a rare thing. But welcoming the stranger always takes risks. And here's the thing, is that it is possible, right, to elevate our security. We always can do more. Trust me. There's a lot of security professionals that can always tell you how much more you can do. But for me, that notion of that hospitality and security do go hand in hand, in my mind, right? One of the biggest deterrents, at least that I've been taught, is just having somebody outside the door so that nobody can get in without being known, without talking to someone. That's a hospitable thing to do, and it's also a security thing to do. But welcoming the stranger, by definition, involves risk.
Angela, and before you pick up on that, I want to read a line from his op-ed and let you react to it. Many parts of Judaism are countercultural, especially the instruction that we do what is right, not what is easy. When it comes to the care with which we are supposed to treat other people, those teachings cross religious and cultural boundaries.
Well, I would say Charlie embodies that message and embodied it on a day when someone was tested beyond imagination. I would say that I think that some people took the message from Colleyville as, well, we shouldn't do that again. We're not going to want to open our door to that stranger. And you definitively, and people said, well, you know, he risked his life for this. And I would say that in some ways, the fact that you lived by your Jewish values to open that door, you continued to live by your values for the rest of that ordeal for 11 hours. And I think that that's what saved your life, because I think the fact that you treated him with such humanity, that he saw your humanity, that the idea that you could do that while a person had a gun to your head, essentially, is why I truly think you are my hero from that day. It was incredibly courageous that you threw the chair. That might be the heroic moment for some people. I think the heroic moment is that you never stopped treating that gunman like a human being from the minute that he was at your door as a stranger to even the way you treated him through the entire ordeal. And the fact that you could live by your values and do what was right even when it was hard is what I think was truly heroic from that day.
So I'm going to give you the last word before I let our senior rabbi close us in this very special conversation. With your words, you said how much love you have received, really, from the world. You've spoken to the president and the prime minister, I think, of Israel, and every foreign leader. Next to Zelensky, people want to see you right now. It really has been powerful how you've walked through this. It's enough to have the trauma, I'm sure processing with your family is plenty, but you've been an ambassador not just for courage, but again, for everything Angela talked about, how it's really at these moments where we see where the fire is the hottest, that you've come through with everything Judaism is supposed to teach us and how we're supposed to be. So your words, you said in the last few weeks, my congregation and I received an outpouring of love and support from strangers the world over. If we begin with that love of the stranger, but offer it not in response to violence, but encouraged by empathy, we might just change our world. I want to give you the last word, if you want to echo anything that you had written.
As I appreciate your words, I also want to acknowledge that a lot of things went right that day. When it comes to living our values, for me, that idea of having our thoughts and our actions, right, that sense of integrity, that sense of congruence, that's something that we need to strive for. in terms of that sense of empathy, that understanding that everybody has, again, a story to share, that understanding that everyone is looking for that sense of belonging, that hope for acceptance. For everyone who walks into a new situation, right, based on the color of their skin, maybe it's their height, maybe it's on the tattoos that they're wearing, or maybe they just have anxiety because they're not good with people, but they know that they want to be a part of a community. Those are the people that we need to extend that sense of love. I meant what I said. The outpouring of support was amazing. And if everybody could feel that sense of acceptance, that sense of compassion, that understanding that the person I am, right, is an infallible human being, and we're not going to see eye to eye on everything. We might passionately disagree. Or maybe because I'm not in your clique, you're not going to see me as somebody who deserves your attention, your acceptance. If we can work to get past all that within the Jewish community and outside of it, then I do believe that our world would indeed be transformed.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to grab this guitar. Don't leave yet.
Yes.
So we're actually in a ritual moment here in the Jewish calendar, which is we are finishing up. It's almost sundown. We're finishing up Yom HaZikaron, which is Israel Memorial Day. So we're kind of on the cusp of that right now. And Charlie said, should we do something to help mark that? And I love that suggestion. And I think this song, which he actually called to mind, which is so perfect for this moment of transition, Al Kol Eila by Naomi Shemer, talks about holding the tension of the bitter and the sweet, the honey and the bee sting, that we carry all of this. And we ask God to watch over all those we love. We ask God not to uproot what we have been planting. So I can't think of a more powerful message, both for this conversation and what we've been doing, but also this moment across the Jewish world as we transition from one to the other. So I'll invite you to sing with me if you want, if you know the words. Al hadvash ve'al ha'oketz, al hamar ve'hamatok, al bitenu hatinoket shmorei li hatov, al ha'esh hamevo'eret, al hamayim hazakim, al ha'ish hashav habayta min hamerchakim, al kol eileh, al kol eileh, shmor na li eili hatov, al hadvash ve'al ha'oketz, al hamar ve'hamatok, al nata kor natua, al tishkach et hatikva, hashiveni ve'ashuva el haaretz hatova. Thank you all for joining us online. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.